Hey, I'm Kane, and I'm a student at UC Berkeley. I got a QuNeo when they first came out, and have since been working on this preset. I started out using KMI's preset for Mixxx, and soon found it lacking. I forked KMI's preset and began hacking on my own. The more features I added, the more that I realized that I wanted. While mixing, a DJ can only do so much, and the script is a way for me to have more control over and more information about the tracks that I'm mixing. In effect, this allows me to focus on the musical elements that I find most important because the nuances are more easily handled. My inspiration is that abstractions free the mind for more complex expression. This preset makes great use of the QuNeo's modes, so let me show you a couple of them. In order to change modes, we first select the mode button and then the mode that we want to enter. Here, I'm going to enter main DJ mode, which is the top left, because that's where I find myself most often. As you can tell, none of the LEDs on the QuNeo have lit up, and that's because we have not told the script that we've changed modes. We do so by pressing the square transport button, and then all the LEDs will turn on according to the mode that we're in. Now let's switch over to library mode. Once again, we press the mode button, and then the mode that we want to enter. We reassert the LEDs, and we see that the LEDs are in a new configuration because we're in a new mode, specifically in this area. Okay. Let's select a track to load into the deck. The way that we can do that is using the rotaries, because the rotaries serve as playlist and track list scrolls respectively. They're slightly coarse, so we can, if we get close and we want to be more precise, that worked out. What we can do is we can use the up and down arrows. The left arrows correspond to selecting playlists and the right arrows to selecting track lists. So let's go to playlist best, which we're at, and let's select marker to mark. Scrolling down. Getting closer. That was pretty close too. So now that we have the track selected, we want to load it into the deck. So in order to do that, we must press the load button for that deck. The load button for deck 1 is right here, and it's green to indicate that we are able to load a track into the deck. The time when we're not able to load a track into the deck is if there's already a track playing in the deck, and we can tell that because the load button will be red. So here, we'll load marker to mark into the deck, and let's go back into main DJ mode and play around with it. So as I insert the LEDs for main DJ mode, you might notice that there are some new ones that came on. That's because the top left quadrant of main DJ mode corresponds to the hot cues in deck 1. So each corner of each pad is a single hot cue. The way they're numbered is 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. The LEDs give us information about those hot cues. So one thing to notice is that hot cue 2 here has no LED because hot cue 2 is not set in this track. You can actually see that in Mixxx too, because if you look at the GUI, hot cue 2 is dark, whereas 1, 3, and 4 are all red. On the QuNeo, the color of the LED also gives us more information about the hot cue. Red hot cues are hot cues that are in the past in terms of the track position. So, looking up at the track in Mixxx, we can see that we're at hot cue 9. So, hot cues before it, which would be 4, as you can see, and apparently 3 and 1, are red. Hot cues that are after it, 13, 14, 15, and 16, are my outro hot cues, so those are all green because we know we haven't passed them yet, as well as 5, 6, 7, 8, and all these. They're all green because we haven't passed them yet. The next hot cue that's coming up is orange, and in this way you can tell what's happening and where which part of the song you're approaching based on what hot cue is coming up. So let's see some of this in action. In order to play a deck, we must use... Okay, so the rotaries have two different functions in main DJ mode. The first function is that they're play buttons for each deck. So the left rotary for the left deck, play button for the left deck, right rotary, play button for the right deck. The other function that they have is that they're scratches. They're turntables. They allow for turntable scratching for each of the decks. The way that we toggle between those modes is by hitting this play button in the transport section. When the play button is dark, that means that the rotary is used for scratching, and when it's bright, that means that the rotary is used for playing. So let's go ahead and play the left deck. The first thing to notice here is that the hot cue, which was next, 9, is now red, and then the one coming up, 11, is orange, and as we pass 11, 11 becomes red, and the next one's coming up, which happens to be 5, is now orange. The next thing to notice is that the rotary is turning, indicating that the deck is playing. Okay, cool. So how are these things used? Well, I like to set my Q1 to be a good intro drum loop. So let's see whether or not that one's set appropriately. As a note, if when you're messing around in Mixxx, or maybe you're making making an actual mix that you want to record, you can just hit the record button and then play it back at any time. So let's check to see how good the loop is at this cue. In order to set a loop in the deck, we must first ensure that we're in looping mode. Looping mode is indicated by the looping LED right here, and is orange when we're in looping mode and green when we're not, because orange corresponds to loops, as we'll see in a minute. Okay, so first, so now that we're in looping mode, we must select the length of the loop that we want to activate. So these buttons here correspond to numbers of beats. So upper left is 1, upper right is 2, 4, and then 8. Right now, I want to try a loop of 4 beats, so let's select that. Two things happen when you select that button. One, a beat loop, well actually 3 things. So the one is that, the first one is that Mixxx sets a loop of 4 beats. Cool, that's what we'd expect. The second is that the number of beats 4 is now orange, which indicates that we have a 4-beat loop set for that, a 4-beat loop set. The next is that the deck loop enable button here shows up. The reason this is important is because we can actually have loops that aren't only 1, 2, 4, 8, because we can double the loop, which makes it go from 4 beats to 8 beats, and then we can double it to 16, and now we can't see, based on the beat numbers, that we have a loop, but the deck loop enable light still shows up. We can also use this to deactivate the loop, so now we can tell that the loop is no longer active. It's great to show that if the track is played, it will not be looped in that section. So let's reset the loop, and let's go back down to 4 beats. Oh, also we can go under 1 too. I think it goes down to 1/16th or 1/32nd, one of those. Right, so there. Cool. So back up to a beat of 4. Loop of 4 beats. So let's see how this loop sounds, because we want to make sure that if we're mixing it, that it's going to sound right. Ooh, that doesn't sound so good to me, because we've got that wash. So it's kind of hanging off at the end of those. So maybe we want to reset Q1. We've got to move that around. Okay, so first let's go back to Q1. So I want the loop now to be before the wash comes in, because I don't want that wash in there at all. I don't want it rising yet. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to navigate backwards a certain number of beats. The easiest way to navigate in a deck is by using the jump buttons. In order to use the jump buttons, we must first make sure that we're in jumping mode. Jumping mode can be activated by hitting one of the 2 jump buttons, either jump backwards or jump forwards. You might notice that as soon as we hit one of the jump buttons, the looping mode turns off. This is for convenience of a single button press to switch between jumping and looping mode. So now we want to jump back a certain number of beats. Right? So first let's turn off this loop, just for clarity. And let's jump back. I want to jump back 8 beats. Okay? So we're not sure if this is the place where we want to set the hot cue yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a temporary cue. I'm just going to set Mixx's cue. My behavior is set at my cue behavior is set at CDJ, which means that when the track is paused, when I hit the cue button, it'll set the cue at the location that the track is at. So I went back 8 beats using the jumping button, and then I set a new cue. So now let's exit jumping mode. You'll notice that as soon as we exit jumping mode, looping mode is automatically activated, once again for convenience, and let's set another loop of 4 beats. Let's hear how this one sounds. Sounds pretty indefinite to me. That's good. Good for mixing. Okay, so let's now move hot Q1 to this new location. In CDJ mode, hitting the cue button while the track is playing will bring us back to the cue with the track paused, which is why it's also good for using as a marker for checking these loops. So now we need to, in order to move hot Q1, we must first delete it, and then we must move it, or set it in the new place. In order to modify hotkeys in such a way, we must enter queuing mode. So, once again, we select a different mode, and this time we go to queue left mode. Queue left mode is for queuing the left deck. We'll notice another quadrant of LEDs has shown up, and the top left quadrant has changed. This is because the top left LEDs now simply show whether or not an LED is active. So once again, hot queue 2 is not set, so there's no hot queue there. Right? and excuse me. So the top right quadrant corresponds to cues that may be deleted. So because hot cue 2 is not set, hot cue 2 cannot be deleted. Makes sense, right? So we want to delete cue 1 because it's not where we want, and we want to set it in a new place. So first we go over to the hot cue delete button, delete it. We note that the hot cue is now not present on either side because, like hot cue 2, it is not enabled. And so now we're free to set the hot cue in our new position. Bam, it shows up on both sides. Okay, cool. Let's switch back. And now let's mess around with this loop. Let's see how it mixes. So, the simplest way to mix things is by using the kills. Or at least what I think the simplest way is. And let me demonstrate this real fast. So, we can kill the highs. We can kill the mids. We can kill the lows. They all have different effects based on the frequency spectrum. Cool. What if we want a finer adjustment of the levels? Well, so the way that this QuNeo preset supports different levels and things is that it has the rhombus serve as a mode button for the vertical sliders. This means that the vertical sliders, each of them, map to multiple different functionalities determined by this mode button. So I'm going to cycle through them here to show you that the LEDs change based on what mode we're in, and to show that there are 4 modes, one corresponding to the LED being off, one to green, so that's mode 2, mode 3, and mode 4. I won't go into detail as to what each of these sliders do in each of the modes, but rest assured you can find very good documentation on them in my GitHub and pictures. So you are quick reference pictures, so it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. So, okay, so now that we've gone over the basics, I want to take a minute to introduce some more novel features. In order to do this, I'm going to have to prep some of the decks a little bit, so bear with me for a minute. Jump back, 16, set another loop of 16. Let's go ahead, let's get another, let's keep it simple, let's get marker to mark again. Same thing, let's get to the same spot. Step back, 16, loop, there we go. Alright, now we want to make sure that the two are together, so let's start them, and sync. Okay, so, first things first, down here, these LEDs serve as a beat counter for each deck. So deck 1 is on the left, deck 2 is on the right, and the beat counters start from 1 and go up to 16 using base 4. In order to the documentation explains, if that's confusing, don't worry about it because the documentation explains it pretty clearly. But the point is that it's cool because we can tell that our tracks are aligned on the 8 counts, which is important for making transitions. Alright, and it may not be, the camera may not be able to pick this up, but the LEDs of each deck are actually pulsing on each beat, which makes it super satisfying to DJ. Okay, so now I want to show, I'm going to bring us to visualizer mode, but first we're going to take a pit stop at library mode again, just to show that the tracks that are playing, the decks that are playing cannot accept loading tracks. Nothing happens. But we can load tracks into the others, the sampler decks, if we want. Okay, so let's go check out visualizer mode. So at visualizer mode, basically, none of the buttons really do anything. Just kind of fun. And none of the buttons do anything except that they light up when you touch them. So the LEDs will still respond, even though they don't change anything. Except that the rotary buttons will still reset, or will reset the beat counter to 1. So if one of your beat counters is off, you can go ahead and fix it if you so choose. But also, the beat counters will be reset when it goes back to the start of the loop. So now they're back in time. So now they're out of time, but at the end of the loop, they'll be back in time. Boom.
Sleep.